to all those who've lost loved ones. Medical assistance in dying is not about taking one's own life. It's about a situation when one's life is ending and how one maintains a dignified end to that life and is able to do so without prolonging suffering. We heard again and again from families and practitioners that no one involved in medical assistance in dying wants anyone to die. They're simply dealing with the realities that medical conditions have presented to them. And with that, Madam Speaker, I will end my comments for this morning.
The honourable member will have 5 minutes of questions after we deal with orders of today, after the oral questions. Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. The honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on Saturday, November 21st, our office collaborated with the Richmond Hill Lawn Bowling Club to hold a holiday food drive in support of the Richmond Hill Community Food Bank. A team of 20 volunteers led by Ted Pickles braved the cold from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. to help collect 2,500 pounds of food and $2,500 of donation for the food bank. I want to thank them, the mayor and the Ward 4 and 5 councillor who lend their support, as well as Bristol Car and Rental Truck for providing us with a truck for the donation. The Richmond Hill Community Food Bank has helped over 1,300 clients a month this year and continues to support residents during these difficult times. I encourage all Canadians to donate to their local food bank if they can. Thank you to the team of volunteers, Ted, the Richmond Hill Lawn Bowling Club, and our community partners for their work supporting our food bank. I'm so proud to represent such an amazing community. Thank you, Richmond Hill.
The honourable member for Barrie, Springwater, or Oromodonte.
Madam Speaker, today I rise in the House to recognize the tragic shooting that ultimately took the life of 12-year-old Dante Andreatta. Madam Speaker, Dante and his mother were walking home from grocery shopping when 2 gang members started shooting at rivals. Horrifically, Dante was struck in the neck in the crossfire. The 2 men charged with the murder have a long history of violent criminal activity. They are not sport shooters, duck hunters, or legal firearms owners. They are criminals. This brazen shooting that took place in broad daylight has impacted me greatly. As a father, I cannot imagine the pain Dante's mother, family, and the community are going through. After consultation with a boots-on-the-ground organization, the One by One movement, we have learned there is a gang war raging in Toronto. Yet, the Prime Minister is waging his own war on legal firearms owners. Community groups are begging for resources and to be heard. When will the Prime Minister step up for this family and this community?
That's right.
The honourable member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Speaker, the United Nations General Assembly will meet on December 2nd to vote in the matter of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including their right to self-determination. Israel and Palestine have been embroiled in a conflict for over 72 years and have faced numerous failed peace negotiations. There are many major factors standing in the way of a two-state solution and a creation of Palestine state. Grievances need to be acknowledged and peace must be made the main focus. Israel's allies, like Canada, need to make it increasingly clear that continued support for Israel is contingent on their willingness to enter serious negotiations. Madam Speaker, this House should be supporting the government and an overwhelming majority of other countries in intensifying and broadening its support for pro-Palestinian resolutions.
L'honorable député de Madawaska.
The member for Madawaska-Restigouche. Mr. Speaker, we recently celebrated Small Business Week at a 2020 gala, organized in part by the Chamber of Commerce of Edmundston and Upper Madawaska.
Even in times of pandemic, the following entrepreneurs and companies. Et voici les récipiendaires.
Here are the winners. Northwest Plumbing and Heating, Young Company of the Year, Bobby's Car Wash and Seals, Innovation Prize for Frontière FM, Community, Hermance Laplante, Alliance Realty, the Samuel Burpee Prize, Group EMS and the Entrepreneurial Award, Dr. Aucoin, for his dentist practice, and Louis-Philippe Nadeau Prize, Jeannette Ouellette. Madam Speaker, congratulations to all these dynamic companies in Northwest New Brunswick who did extremely well even in a pandemic.
The Minister of Health said she has the highest regard for Dr. Patricia Daly, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and Mayor Kennedy Stewart. Why then has the minister refused to follow their sound advice and decriminalize simple drug possession to help save lives? In BC alone, 1,386 people have died from overdose. Across the country, over 16,000 people have been taken by the war on drugs. The downtown east side is under siege with record overdose deaths. And we now have the highest COVID-19 infection rates in the city. Our community is also grappling with the largest homeless encampment in the country. We need urgent help from the federal government. Vancouver Council is calling on the government to decriminalize. The province wants the federal government to cost share 50-50 in their aggressive pandemic housing plan to house the homeless. Housing advocates want the port to stand down and not pursue civil proceedings against those who acted in solidarity with the people.
Member for Labrador. For Labrador. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Is it good now?
Yes, perfect. We can hear you.
Thank you. Northerners have shown incredible strength and resilience in protecting their communities and loved ones from COVID-19. As cases continue to rise in Nunavut, we've heard the call from the government of Nunavut, Inuit partners, and community organizations for additional federal
support. Point d'ordre, Madame la Présidente.
Point of order. The Honourable Minister. You're on mute, Madam Minister. Can you hear me now? Yes, we can. I would ask my colleague to please put on her headset because the French interpreter cannot hear what is being said. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Minister.
Could you please put your headset so that the interpreters could translate? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unfortunately, my headset is not available. With consent, I will continue.
Does the honourable member have the consent of the House to continue?
No consent. We have to have interpretation for oral statements.
Here. This has been an issue that has been.
The honourable member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Madam Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic is serious. Compared to the Hong Kong flu of the late 1960s, COVID-19 has resulted in almost 3 times as many deaths. This pandemic, however, affects more than just our physical well-being. April to June saw 302 opioid-related deaths in Alberta, 43% increase from the height of the opioid crisis in 2018. A university study suggests that the socioeconomic upheaval surrounding the virus could result in over 2,100 more suicide deaths, above the Canadian average by the end of 2021. The rising toll of suicides, marital breakdowns, spousal abuse must give pause to every decision maker when looking at new restrictions and considering lockdowns. All factors need to be considered when choosing strategies to end this pandemic, including social wellness, mental health, and economic survival. My constituents are worried that the infringement on our constitutionally guaranteed rights, both big and small, by governments is not being offset by real substantive gains that end the pandemic. Madam Speaker, we cannot continue this way forever.
The member for Hochelaga. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Hochelaga lies at the heart of Montreal East, and this huge area has an industrial past. There are thousands of square meters of contaminated land, but there's a lot of potential for green economic development, which will take climate change into account. If we are to revive Montreal East, we'll have to take environmental action, decontaminate the ground, invest in public transport, and in companies which engage in the circular economy. Last week, our government introduced the bill, the Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act. We will make sure there is accountability to Canadians with regard to environmental goals. It'll take several years to deploy the full potential of Montreal East, and I'm determined to work with everyone to make that happen.
For Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was Joseph Stalin's Russian regime back in 1932 and 33 where he enforced starvation amongst Ukrainian people, Madam Speaker. It has become a genocide recognized as the Holodomor. It is, when you take a look at the 1.3 million Canadians of Ukrainian heritage, you get an appreciation of why that is such an important event that we need to remember. In fact, Madam Speaker, whether you're of Ukrainian heritage or not, the brutal policy of starving people as a form of genocide is horrific, where we saw children actually having to go into fields looking for food, being shot, a population having to eat roots, rats, all sorts of things that had taken place of a horrific nature, Madam Speaker. In Canada, we recognize the fourth Saturday of November as a time in which we should reflect on that horrific incident and just remember it, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask the Minister of Agriculture of this government to give some of her attention to the people who work every day to feed Canadians. Farmers are the lifeblood of many rural communities. They've given so much of themselves, and we have to show them some respect. The Liberal government has made a lot of promises to buy their silence and to get farmers to agree to the latest concessions made in trade talks. But it's time for the government to table the schedule of compensation promised to eligible farm producers and processors. That's the very least the government must do to recognize just how important the men and women of this vital sector of our economy are. Supply management must be protected, and our leader has committed to not put it on the table in future trade talks. Enough is enough. Why cause farmers and producers so much anxiety? When you give the illusion of respect, you do what the Minister of Agriculture is doing. She is evasive and changes the rules of the game. So I call on the Minister of Agriculture to stop playing a game of cat and mouse and to keep her promises to our farmers. The honourable member for Hull-Aylmer. Madam Speaker, the first snowfall has suddenly brought on winter, and people are starting to prepare for Christmas. That's a great thing for the Old Aylmer's Christmas market, which will bring much happiness to everyone in this, its 7th year of operation. I'd like to congratulate the organizers for their dedication and creativity. Once again, you've organized the fairy tale event, which will also respect public health guidelines. Great job. People will be able to buy local from farmers and craftspeople in the Outaouais.
The Christmas festivities in Aylmer have been an opportunity for the community to come together and showcase the contributions of volunteers. Although the Santa Claus parade must be canceled this year, the Old Aylmer Christmas market will still be held, supporting local farmers, producers, and artisans. I invite you all to come and enjoy Aylmer's natural beauty and heritage amid the glow.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Madam Speaker, as the fall economic update draws near, I want to draw the attention of the Minister of Finance to the health and economic well-being of Canadian women who have been hit hardest by the pandemic. In fact, Canada is one of the few countries in the world where women account for a greater proportion of both COVID-19 cases and death when compared to men. The economic impact of the pandemic on Canadian women has also been severe, and the ongoing mismanagement by this Liberal government will continue to hamper Canada's economic recovery. The failure of the Prime Minister to enact a comprehensive plan to protect jobs that predominantly employ women has led to more than 20,000 women leaving the workforce altogether, with the proportion of women working in Canada now at its lowest level in 30 years, which is as long as I've been alive, so it's quite incredible. The biggest obstacle to the economic success of women in Canada and in my riding is the availability of the vaccine so that the economy can return to normal. Canadian women deserve to know when the vaccine will be available to them and their loved ones. They need to plan. I am hopeful the Minister of Finance will include a detailed vaccine.
L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, 4 years ago, 6 Canadians were gunned down and 5 others seriously injured in the shooting at the Quebec City Mosque. The shooter was condemned to 40 years, as is allowed under our multiple murder legislation. But yesterday, the Court of Appeal reversed that decision and imposed 25 years. It's a sad day, said the president of the Quebec Islamic Center. In 25 years, the shooter will be able to walk free, but not those who died. The act in question was not conservative legislation. It was passed, though, by our government, but left in place by the Liberal government. The appeal court judges called the judge absurd, odious, and cruel. But for us, what is absurd, odious, and cruel is the death of 6 Muslim Canadians who were at the Quebec City mosques and who were shot down by a criminal.
Cowichan Malahat Langford.
Madam Speaker, the coastal waters of southern Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands are truly beautiful and home to a vast array of life and delicate marine ecosystems. They are among the most diverse in the world's temperate waters and offer fantastic recreation opportunities, including scuba diving, whale watching, sea kayaking, and coastal cruising. For untold centuries, these waters have supported vibrant First Nations coastal communities, and they continue to do so today. Unfortunately, the natural beauty of this area is under threat from the presence of large freighters, which are using our waters as an overflow industrial parking lot for the Port of Vancouver. At the same time, the federal government is actively pursuing the establishment of a national marine conservation area here. If the Liberals truly believe in the work to establish this NMCA, I urge them to support my bill C-250, which amends the Canada Shipping Act to prohibit freighters from anchoring in these waters.
L'honorable député de...
The member for Joliette. Thank you, Madam Speaker. November is Social Economy Month. For my colleagues from the other provinces who are not really familiar with this, because this is distinct to Quebec, it means co-ops and non-profits. It means entrepreneurship, which is collective and inclusive and at the service of the community. We're talking about brave people who are getting together to serve their community, their fellow citizens. These 22 areas lie at the heart of Quebec's economic development. We're talking about 11,200 businesses which generate $48 billion in revenues, 220,000 employees, and nearly 300,000 volunteers who help the economy. So to all of you in the social economy, on behalf of the Bloc Québécois, thank you for your initiatives, for your creativity, your dedication to your community, and keep on innovating together.
Haldeman Northwood.
Madam Speaker, I rise to honor the deans of our Conservative caucus, the member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke, and the member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, as they celebrate the 20th anniversary of their election to this great chamber. These 2 members have always been steadfast in their dedication, one to good governance and constitutional matters, the other to our Canadian military and common sense. And I can say firsthand that they both approach their job today with the same passion and conviction as they did when I first met them over 16 years ago. And they both remain fearless when it comes to voicing their and their constituents' views. Madam Speaker, I invite this House to join me in thanking and congratulating these 2 honourable members for a combined 40 years of service to our great country.
The honourable member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I would like to take this opportunity to celebrate the life of a remarkable man, Master Corporal Derek Selleck. Derek served as a loyal member in the Canadian Armed Forces for over 20 years. He was a recipient of numerous awards and recognitions, including the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. He served his country valiantly as well as his community. Humber River Black Creek was where Derek called home. It is where he founded his where he founded the Multicultural Women's Organization, an organization which empowers women from all cultural backgrounds through sport, specifically soccer. He was a selfless, generous man who was proud of his legacy in the armed forces. My thoughts and prayers go out to his family, his brothers and sisters, and to all of the community who have suffering a significant loss. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, the killer who murdered 6 Canadians at the Quebec City Mosque has now seen his sentence reduced. According to the court, having consecutive sentences is unconstitutional. That legislation has been in place for 5 years by the current Liberal government. This is a piece of Canadian legislation. We hope that the Attorney General of Canada will bring the matter to the Supreme Court. What does the government have to say? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Canadian member of this chamber, and I will say that this decision will rekindle a great deal of hurt and anger among those who are affected by this terrible crime, which includes people like me in this chamber, their victims, their families, and their friends, and people in Quebec and across the country. There are important questions that are raised by this judgment, and we're going to examine this judgment fully. Our thoughts remain with the families and with the survivors. We've stood them throughout, and will continue to support them through this awful tragedy.
Honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member. Thank you very much. It's unfortunate that Canadians are in a difficult situation with COVID. This government failed on rapid testing, closing the borders, and now it's delaying when it comes to vaccines. I have a simple question for the government. When will Canadians receive the vaccine? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. We have a clear answer, Madam Speaker. Every Canadian who wishes to get vaccinated will have access to a vaccine. This government has taken an aggressive approach to purchasing vaccines, and we now have the best, most diverse vaccine portfolio in the world. We have started planning a distribution and logistics system, and we have been working with provinces since May, day and night, on unrolling our system for distributing the vaccine. Madam Speaker, when the vaccine is ready, Canada will be ready. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, the problem is that the vaccines are already ready. In only a few weeks, the British will start having access to the vaccine, as well as Americans and Germans. We're talking a matter of a few weeks. Before Christmas, 2 billion people around the world will have access to a vaccine before Canadians. At the very least, and I'll just say, we know we're not going to get a vaccine before Christmas. At the very least, can the government tell us whether we'll have a vaccine by February? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, I don't know if the member for Louis Saint-Laurent is familiar with the FDA, but I don't know if he has acquaintance there, but I can say that I can't speculate on what other government regulators elsewhere in the world will do. But what I can say is that we are standing with our allies, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, the European community, and that we have a very robust vaccine portfolio to ensure that the vaccine will be available for Canadians and that Canada will be ready.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals spent hundreds of millions of dollars on Canadian production of the COVID-19 vaccine. In August, they announced that Canada would be able to make 250,000 doses by November. Well, it's now the end of November, and the Prime Minister now says that we don't have any domestic production capacity. So the reality is that because of Liberal failures, Canada will be getting the vaccine after 1/3 of the world's population. What happened?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And when this pandemic began, Canadians understood that we did not have significant biomanufacturing capacity, and that was certainly not helped by the previous anti-science Conservative government. But we've made significant investments both prior to the pandemic and now during the pandemic to augment our biomanufacturing capacity, to enable life sciences investments at ISED. We're continuing to do the right things, make the right investments, and our biomanufacturing capacity is increasing thanks to that investment.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Millwood.
Madam Speaker, just having a contract for a vaccine is very different than actually knowing when most Canadians will receive that vaccine. What we do know is that the Americans will be vaccinating 20 million of their population in December and 30 million in January. So by the middle of January, the U.S. will have vaccinated the entire population of Canada, the equivalent. So I'm asking you again, why is Canada at the back of the line when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, from the outset, we have clearly recognized the unparalleled undertaking of procuring vaccines for Canadians and the challenges that come with it. We've been working around the clock with our officials, with provinces since May on a vaccine distribution system, and we will continue to deliver the strongest possible response to COVID-19. We've said it in this chamber, we've said it in committee, we've said it to the media and the public, and are happy to repeat again. We'll be receiving vaccines in the first quarter of 2021. We're confident in our position. Canadians can be very proud of the position that Canada is in. When a vaccine is ready, Canada.
L'honorable député de Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Even the Liberals have admitted it. They are using the Liberalist partisan tool to filter judicial appointments in order to ascertain the political affiliation of candidates. According to the Journal de Montréal and Radio-Canada, in an in-camera vote, the Liberals prevented a committee inquiry on partisan judicial appointments. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Justice keeps telling us that the appointment process is open and transparent. If that's really true, why did the Liberals have to secretly vote to prevent us from studying it? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, we have created an open and transparent appointment system. In 2016, we introduced essential reforms, such as the reform of the Advisory Committee. And since then, we have appointed more than 400 exceptional jurists. The judges named under this new procedure since 2016, 5% identify as members of the LGBTQ2 community, 3% are Indigenous, and 1% are living with a disability. It is a very diverse process. The Honourable Member. Madam Speaker, if the process is really as good as the Minister is saying, he shouldn't be afraid of our questions. But according to the media, the Liberals prevented the committee from studying the matter. And once again, with the support of the NDP, in secret. What did they offer the NDP to help stifle this scandal? Is it their way of returning the favor for having extended the wage subsidy for political parties? Or are we going to see new Democratic judges? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, I will quote a letter from the Canadian Bar Association. According to the association, the government has not interfered in the process to favour Liberals, and the process has not led to the appointment of candidates who are not worthy of holding these positions. This is a merit-based process that reflects the diversity of Canada. The best candidates must be identified. Madam Speaker, since 2016, our government has made essential reforms and created an open and transparent process.
Madam Speaker, this week, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ordered this government to apply Jordan's principle to non-status First Nations children living off reserve who are recognized by their community. This government has already received 9 non-compliance orders from the tribunal regarding the racist treatment of Indigenous children in care. Will the Minister please commit today to not appeal this decision? And will the government do this, or will they continue to fight Indigenous kids in court?
Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and we welcome the order of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. I would note for the member opposite that our department is currently reviewing and revising what was said in the order. But we are looking forward to the implementation of this definition that expands the definition of First Nations children, which is so important to closing the socioeconomic gaps between non-Indigenous and Indigenous children. I would note for the member opposite that since 2016 we have provided 750,000 supports behind every support as an Indigenous child, as well as the budget investments of $1.2 billion in 2019 to close that gap that we continue to close and implement the orders. Thank you, Madam.
L'honorable député de Rosemont.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Madam Speaker, the Liberals are great at making nice speeches, but they're not so good at helping their constituents. In fact, the Liberals aren't even answering constituents' calls. People have questions. They're getting vague answers, and they are tired of waiting for hours on the phone to get information. Will the Liberals invest resources in order to answer people's questions, or at the very least give parliamentarians a reliable tool to answer questions from constituents? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, and I can appreciate the member's question, and the government does the best it can at providing the responses that are necessary in order to try to accommodate the type of answers that members are looking for. I know the member is not necessarily specifically putting a question to a specific department, but that, unfortunately, that's the best I can do for an answer.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Madam Speaker, this week we found out that the delivery of the Pfizer vaccine will be, according to the Minister, in a just-in-time delivery method. This vaccine needs to be stored below -70 Celsius, and this means that our capacity to give that vaccine to Canadians depends on our capacity to store it. So by April 1st, 2021, how many doses of the Pfizer vaccine will Canada be able to receive from the company per week?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, what we've been repeatedly saying is that we've been working with the provinces for very many months now, in fact since May, day and night. The best people in the Government of Canada are working on this, the best people right across this country, and I want to take the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to applaud the hard-working and dedicated public servants that are putting in place among the world's most robust vaccine logistics and distribution systems that will obviously conform to the requirements of specific vaccines, and Canada will be ready when those vaccines are ready, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The government signed a contract with a company called CanSino regarding a COVID vaccine in early May. Contracts with the leading vaccine candidates weren't signed until months later. The CanSino deal fell apart on August 26th. So for the period between May 12th, when the deal was announced, and August 26th, was the Minister of Public Safety ever briefed by CSIS or the RCMP about potential problems with Canada signing a deal with CanSino for a COVID vaccine?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And although I can't speak to the specifics of any advice given by the National Security Establishment in this or any other case, let me assure the member opposite that the National Security Services of Canada, the CSIS and CSE, are very, very conscientious and comprehensive in the advice that they give to government, and we pay a great deal of attention to their advice. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, we know that Canadians won't receive the COVID vaccine until months after other countries have. This will cost lives and jobs. The government's decision to focus on a deal with CanSino, which may have been signed due to diplomatic priorities as opposed to health priorities, and may have fallen apart due to diplomatic reprisal or advice from CSIS and the RCMP, did that decision have any role to play in why Canadians are so far behind in receiving doses of vaccines from other companies?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yeah, quite the contrary, Madam Speaker. Canada is in a very privileged position with a diversified portfolio of vaccine candidates. We look forward to the regulatory approval of all of those. In fact, we know that of the first three who've received encouraging news, Canada has arrangements with all three of those vaccine candidates. Canada compares very favorably. For example, the Moderna vaccine, we were there among the first in the world, in front of the UK, for example. So Canada is in a very good position. When vaccines are ready, Madam Speaker, Canada will be ready.
L'honorable député de Lévis-Lapierre.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lapierre. Madam Speaker, Canadians are impatient. The provinces are impatient. Our health system is under the strain, and the government hasn't given us clear answers about when the vaccines will arrive. How is it that countries that Canada said it was going to help are actually going to be getting the vaccine before Canadians? It really makes us wonder about the government's position on the international stage. Madam Speaker, will it be possible to get the vaccine at the same time as other G7 countries? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Our vaccine portfolio can be compared very favorably with all others in the world. Among the 7 vaccine candidates in the portfolio, there are 3 very promising ones, and Canada is working closely with the 10 provinces and 3 territories, the men and women who are preparing our logistics and distribution systems. When the vaccine is ready, Madam Speaker, Canada will be ready. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lebinière. Madam Speaker, a government should consider all possible options to strengthen our vaccine production capacity in Canada. A simple way to do that would be to guarantee to Canadian companies that their vaccines, their Canadian vaccines, will be bought repeatedly long-term. That way, our infrastructure and know-how will be strengthened and maintained. Madam Speaker, when will the government sign long-term agreements with Canadian businesses for vaccine manufacturing? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. When this pandemic began, Canada had very low levels of bioproduction. Something needed to be done in order to fix that problem of underinvestment in production capacity. This is a problem that has been in place for decades. Right away, we realized that we were going to need to invest in our domestic production, and that's what we've done. We have increased capacity. Madam Speaker, I know that Canadians can believe in the investments we've made. The Honourable Member for Montmagny-Lillé-Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Madam Speaker, the director of Plastique Agnon at Port-Joli has been waiting for temporary foreign workers for some time. He hoped to get temporary foreign workers from Madagascar who are not only skilled but also francophones. He applied last year, but due to this government's inaction, he has lost a $4 million a year contract. A contract that has now gone to Mexico, Madam Speaker. There are 300,000 public servants in the Government of Canada. What is the Minister of Immigration waiting for? Before reassigning as many public servants as necessary in order to reduce these unacceptable delays. Before giving the floor to the Parliamentary Secretary, I would like to remind all members online to please go on mute. Thank you very much. And now, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, the pandemic has affected almost all aspects of our life. Local restrictions have led to the closure of some international visa centers, but IRCC processing centers remained open, and we are continuing to process files while respecting health directives. We have also created innovative measures in order to process requests as quickly as possible and reduce COVID delays. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, this week, after 8 months of being in the pandemic, the Prime Minister informed us that the vaccine would reach Canada later than in other countries. Yesterday, the Prime Minister spoke with the Premier of Quebec, François Legault. Quebec is already preparing its vaccination plan, and it wanted to know 2 important things. When will Quebec be receiving the first doses of the vaccine? And how many doses a week will Quebec receive subsequently? Did the Prime Minister answer Mr. Legault? And can he give us that answer as well? Because Canadians have a right to know. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I can assure Canadians and my honourable colleague that the Government of Quebec and the Government of Canada are working together in order to deliver the vaccine to Quebecers and to other Canadians, and that they are doing so thanks to the best vaccine portfolio in the world. Once a vaccine is approved, we will be able to give the provinces more accurate numbers, but until then, we are ensuring that the logistics and distribution system will be ready. Quebecers can believe in that, can trust in that. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, the Parliamentary Secretary did not answer the question, perhaps because he didn't know the answer. The vaccine race started 8 months ago, and the federal government hasn't done anything to produce vaccines here. It has not encouraged pharma companies to take out licenses with the most advanced companies like Brazil, India, and China have done. It hasn't done anything to increase local production. It has not harmonized its approval process with advanced producing countries. It put all its eggs in the same basket, agreements with foreign companies. And this week we learned that it lost that bet, that we've all lost. How can it justify that failure to Quebecers? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think all Canadians understand that the former Harper government was hostile to science. It cut in research research biotechnology companies. There was no investment in bioproduction capacity. Now, our government is investing in that. Our government is creating that capacity, and Canadians will be protected. We have everything we need in the vaccine portfolio. We will be there for Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Lake Country.
Madam Speaker, it's been a week since the government announced a new trade deal between Canada and the United Kingdom, and yet we still have few details. We've learned this government failed to consult in any meaningful way with businesses and labor over the entire 3 years they were apparently working on this deal. It's disappointing, it's top-down, and it is certainly a missed opportunity. Why did the minister not feel it was important to reach out and hear from businesses and labor organizations?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, when it comes to defending the interests of Canadians, we ensured that the views and the voices of all Canadians were heard. The new trade continuity agreement with the United Kingdom is not a comprehensive new trade agreement. It is a rollover, essentially, of CETA, for which we negotiated during 7 years and consulted extensively with all stakeholders during that time. As we have always done, we will continue to engage with Canadian businesses, our labor, key stakeholders on negotiating the full and comprehensive trade agreement with the UK that is upcoming in the next year, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, this Liberal government says that it wants to protect supply management, but it has made unprecedented concessions in the CUSMA agreement. In 2019, the Agriculture Minister said that there would be a compensation plan over 8 years. They sent a check in the election year, but for the 7 other years, still nothing for dairy producers, and egg and poultry producers and processors still haven't received anything. Now Canada is starting negotiations with the UK. Will the Prime Minister commit to not making more concessions when it comes to the supply managed sector? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The interpreter regrets, but 2 people are talking at once. Let me be very clear to all our dairy producers. There is not a single ounce of more cheese, not a single ounce of cheese beyond what is already being accepted is going to enter Canada due to the agreement with the UK. We will support the supply offered sector for our producers, Madam Speaker, and we will be there for Quebecers and Canadians throughout the entire country. Thank you very much.
For Kelowna Lake Country.
The Minister of International Trade recently spoke about an agreement signed with Australia on wine excise taxes, saying she was pleased that we came to an agreement. This agreement will be devastating to Canadian domestic wineries, as it gave Australia basically what they wanted, which is Canadian wineries paying excise tax. Can the minister please explain what is so pleasing about putting thousands of Canadian jobs at risk and having domestic Canadian wineries pay $40 million in new taxes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to assure the member opposite that our government understands the tremendous value that the wine industry brings to Canada and the contribution that the sector brings to our reputation as a world-class agricultural producer. Our government will continue to stand up for Canadian workers and defend the interests of our Canadian wine industry, and we are working closely with provinces on this issue and will continue to stand up for Canadian workers and our wine industry.
The Honourable Member for Niagara Falls.
Madam Speaker, last week, the Minister of Small Business and International Trade's lack of a response to my question on our important grape and wine sector spoke volumes about her government's commitment to this vital sector. It is our understanding stakeholders in the Canadian wine industry have been meeting with senior government officials to discuss trade compliance solutions to support the grape and wine industry after the excise tax exemption ends in 2020. Madam Speaker, is the government any closer to determining a solution to the problem they created in the first place?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, as the member opposite has pointed out himself, we are working hand in hand with our wine industry, with our hardworking Canadian wine producers in order to find a solution to this issue. We are absolutely intent on continuing to defend our Canadian wine industry, and we will continue to work with all members across the aisle who are interested on this issue in order to find a resolution.
The Honourable Member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, the government must support small businesses that are falling through the cracks. Bear and Joey, a new restaurant in my riding, is facing the exact same challenges as other small businesses, but they had the bad luck of opening during a global pandemic. After years of planning and pouring their life savings into developing their business, they don't qualify for wage or rent subsidies. When will this government give startups and all small businesses the help they need to survive and stop leaving businesses like Bear and Joey to face this pandemic on their own?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the member opposite for this question. As she raised herself, our new rent subsidy and our wage subsidy legislation has passed. Now we are able to supply up to 90% of a subsidy on commercial rent. With respect to new businesses and startups, such as the one in her riding, I would direct the member to the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, which is there in order to make sure that no business and no entrepreneur in this country is left behind.
The Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Madam Speaker, according to the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce, 30% of small businesses are in desperate need of childcare. Having universal, affordable and accessible childcare has never been so important to Canadian families, particularly to women struggling with the second wave of the pandemic. With the economic update on Monday, the Liberals must step up and partner with BC and other provinces to make historic investments in childcare that will allow Canadian parents to rejoin the workforce. After decades of broken promises, will the Liberals finally commit to making universal, affordable childcare?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I actually appreciate the honourable member's question. It is something that is a priority for us. We are on track to continue to invest over $7.5 billion. We've created over 40,000 affordable childcare spaces since coming into office. We are also committed to creating 250,000 before and after school spaces. And in the speech from the throne, the honourable member has noted, obviously, that we are committed to creating a national system of early learning and childcare that's affordable and accessible to all parents in Canada.
L'honorable député de Vimy.
The honourable member for Vimy. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The citizens of my riding know that while we are taking ambitious action to fight climate change, we must also position our economy to meet the demands of the future. From manufacturing to natural resources, Canada is well positioned to be a leader in the economy of tomorrow. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change explain how the Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act would not only ensure clean water for the future generations? The Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for Vimy for her important work on climate action. Committing to transparency and accountability helps people and businesses plan and know that they can count on Canada to be a great place to invest. The Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act will build on the leadership of countless businesses and help position Canada to meet the future demands of global markets. Madam Speaker, Canadians, industry, international markets, and oil and gas companies know that the net zero is both good for our economy and our environment.
The Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen and Nicola.
Madam Speaker, billions of dollars have been laundered into this country, leaving in its wake thousands of devastated families, killing so many sons and daughters and brothers and sisters from spiking opioid deaths. Now, the BC Attorney General has pointed the finger at this government for its lack of care and resources. He said, and I quote, "There has been no change or increase to police officers dedicated to anti-money laundering criminal investigations in the province," end quote. Will the minister admit that by doing nothing, he's effectively letting criminals off the hook, or is he going to continue to point the finger at others for his government's failures?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the member opposite for a very important question. And after, quite frankly, the scorched earth approach of the Harper Conservatives closing down money laundering, let me advise the member what we in fact have done. And over the last 2 years alone, Madam Speaker, we've invested over $300 million in the RCMP, FinTrack, and CRA. We've announced the establishment of a public safety action coordination enforcement team. And this month alone, Madam Speaker, the RCMP has further approved for $98 million for the creation to replace the offices closed by the Conservatives with new integrated money laundering investigative teams, which will add...
The honourable member for Mission, Matsqui, Fraser Canyon.
Madam Speaker, report after official report continue to show that BC and Canada have a serious money laundering problem. A year and a half ago, the Liberals announced more RCMP support to combat this crime. But BC's Attorney General just stated, and I quote, "I find this profoundly unfortunate. There has been no change or an increase in police officers dedicated to anti-money laundering criminal investigations in the province. This is unacceptable. How many new officers will BC receive and when? British Columbians want answers."
Well, Minister.
Madam Speaker, it is unacceptable, and unfortunately what the member has just said is also incorrect. As I've said, we have invested $300 million in the RCMP, FinTrack, and CRA. We've announced the establishment, and the work is underway, of the Public Safety Action Coordination Enforcement Teams. The CBSA Center of Expertise, as well as amendments to the Criminal Code, have taken place. And this month, Madam Speaker, the RCMP has approved the spending of $98 million towards the creation of new integrated money laundering investigative teams, adding additional officers in Alberta, Ontario, BC, and Quebec. And, Madam Speaker, the RCMP has launched the Counter Illicit Finance Alliance.
The honourable member for Battle River, Crowfoot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Rural crime is a huge issue in my riding. There was a bank robbery in Czar, police impersonators on Highway 41, and even a store in Amherst owned by the mayor being driven into and burglarized. And these are just a few examples. Things were bad before COVID, and it has only gotten worse since. The Liberals' only response to date is to dismiss. When will the minister and this government stop targeting law-abiding firearms owners, stop blaming Stephen Harper, and actually take rural crime seriously?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and let me assure the member opposite that we in fact do take this very seriously, and in fact we've made substantial amounts of money, $327 million, available to the provinces and territories right across this country, including in the member's province. I've spoken recently to the provincial minister responsible, and I've asked her very clearly that she must tell the people of her province how that they have spent and invested that money. But I can also tell you, Madam Speaker, that, for example, in Saskatchewan, the Attorney General has said that they are on the right track in dealing with rural crime, and they've seen a 10% reduction. Similar data out of Alberta also shows that progress, significant progress.
The honourable member for Fundy Royal.
Madam Speaker, with it being victims and survivors of crime.
You're on mute. I'm sorry.
We want to hear that. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with it being Victims and Survivors of Crime Week, Canadians were outraged to read a decision yesterday that a provincial court struck down the law that would allow judges to hand out consecutive life sentences to the country's cruelest murderers. If the government does not defend the law, it will have significant consequences across Canada. The minister failed to defend his government's previous criminal code amendments. Will he stand up for victims and their families by defending the law now?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, as I said earlier on in question period, this decision is going to rekindle a great deal of hurt and anger among those who are affected by this terrible crime, including the Muslim Canadian community, of which I count myself a member. The victims, their families, their friends, the people in Quebec and across this country. There are important questions raised by this judgment. We will take the necessary time to fully examine it. Our thoughts are focused with the families and the survivors. We have stood them and with the Muslim Canadian community throughout this awful tragedy, and we will continue to do so.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Nejet-Témiscouata-les-Basques. Madam Speaker, few industries have suffered from COVID as much as tourism. Tourism, restaurants, events, hotels. These are businesses that, for the most part, are not even allowed to open according to public health. Yet in the 8th month of pandemic, they're still waiting for help from the federal government. The Minister of Economic Development has been telling us for 8 months that tourism is important. Well, that should show. On Monday, the government delivers its economic update. Is the government going to finally offer specific programs for tourism? The Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the question from the member. The Minister has put in place the Regional Recovery and Relief Fund, a $1.5 billion fund, which is enabling many businesses, including those working in the hospitality industry, to get the help they need. And in particular, in Quebec, it has been very effective. I would invite the member, if they have any particular cases, to contact myself or the other parliamentary secretary so we can work on a solution together. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Neger-Témiscouat-Basque. Madam Speaker, it's quite something that federal assistance doesn't meet the needs of the industries that are hardest hit by COVID. We're talking about an industry that was paralyzed back in the spring, it's paralyzed today, and is now learning that next summer will be just as difficult because Ottawa wasn't able to get the COVID vaccine in time. The economic update is on Monday. It's the last chance for many companies in Quebec. Will the government finally announce a specific targeted tourism strategy? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I can tell you that we have been there from the get-go for the tourism industry through our wage subsidy, which has been extended into next year, through our relief as it relates to rent, as well as the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, a $1.5 billion fund that's there for the tourism industry that thousands of workers and thousands of businesses across Canada are accessing. We're going to continue to be there as long as we need to continue to support our very important tourism industry from coast to coast to coast. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Denethor, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Canadian farmers produce the highest quality canola in the world. Health Canada recently announced they will make a decision on banning neonic insecticides in the next 6 months. This government, if they had consulted with canola producers, would know that neonics are strictly used as a seed treatment, are an essential tool in the production of canola, and allow for a reduction in their reliance on foliar and insecticides. Madam Speaker, will the Minister commit to making decisions based on real science and to consulting with Canadian canola producers?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, since the start, we have been working with provincial and territorial parts to get through this crisis. We're listening to Canadians and have taken many measures to support them. The launch of the Emergency Processing Fund of $77.5 million to help producers. We added an additional $200 million in borrowing capacity for the Canadian Dairy Commission. $35 million investment to produce production for temporary foreign workers and address COVID outbreaks on farms, a $50 million investment to help with mandatory isolation period of temporary foreign workers. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cloverdale Langley.
Madam Speaker, during the Justice Committee hearings on Bill C-7, Minister Qualtrough admitted that it's easier to get
The Honourable Member cannot, I'm sorry, the Honourable Member cannot use names in the House.
Liberal committee members voted against improving access to medical services for disabled Canadians while rushing to make euthanasia a standard of care. On this side of the House, we listened to the disability community when they told us that this bill is their worst nightmare. Why won't the government listen?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate the question, and the issue of sensitivity towards persons with disabilities is central for all parliamentarians in this House. We're crafting a piece of legislation that ensures the autonomy and dignity and competence of individuals who choose this path, while all the time ensuring that there are safeguards in place to protect those who are vulnerable. Ensuring the competence and dignity of Canadians is critical. This is a delicate issue, it is a moral issue, it is a profound issue, but it is one that we are deeply concerned about, and we are taking all necessary steps.
Honourable Member of St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, this week at the Justice Committee, Liberal MPs incredibly rejected all amendments to Bill C-7 to protect the vulnerable. In its reckless rush to ram through this shoddy bill, why is the government ignoring the pleas of virtually every national disabilities rights organization, more than 1,000 physicians, and other important voices for vulnerable and marginalized Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I thank the member for his question and would point out for his edification and for those of the members of the House that 2 amendments were accepted, one by the NDP and one by the Green Party. The second important piece to conceptualize here is that much of it has been made about the competence and autonomy of individuals choosing the path of MAID. Madame Gladue and Monsieur Truchon themselves were persons with a disability. What the court said in that important case is that denying people with disabilities the same access to MAID that is provided to persons with abilities actually renders their autonomy, their competence, and their dignity in question. That is what we're seeking to address, that particular void. That is what this is built.
L'honorable député d'Alfred.
The Honourable Member for Alfred Pellant. Madam Speaker, in Laval, our Black communities are active in both business and community sectors. Their involvement supports the prosperity and vitality of my community of Laval. Yet, even in 2020, they face many obstacles. Could the Minister explain to the Black communities in Laval what our government is doing to support Black entrepreneurs and community leaders? The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et j'aimerais...
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question and his work in the community of Laval. The government knows that when everyone participates in the economy, everyone benefits, and that's why earlier this week we announced the launch of 2 of the 3 pillars of the entrepreneurship program for Black communities, the first of its kind in the country. We know that systemic racism exists everywhere, even in the business world, and we must take tangible action like this program, this innovative program, to fight it.
Member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For months, the Liberals left my private member's bill to legalize single-event sports betting in limbo while they shut down Parliament. At that time, it simply wasn't a priority. Well, now the government has brought forward their own legislation on this matter. The fact is, tourism, gaming, and sports sectors need the help right now. Will the government commit today to bring this bill for debate, a vote, without further delay?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, our government is committed to ensuring that those who engage in gambling can do so in a safe and regulated way. The current laws prohibiting betting on single-event sport betting allowed organized crime to profit and created economic disparities for our communities. That's why we are proposing changes to the legislation that has been tabled to allow the provinces and territories to regulate this and Canadian communities to benefit from the revenues. These changes will also bring about additional transparency to support responsible gambling and provide assistance to those in need of support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Madam Speaker, a father in my riding who meets all the criteria for employment insurance has to fight for it. You know why? Because he's a Quebecer, he took parental leave, and he has applied for the Emergency Employment Insurance Program, which he's entitled to, and the system can't manage it. Only Quebec parents are facing this prejudice. The Liberal government has again forgotten Quebecers. Madam Speaker, when will the Minister resolve this problem in the system, and more importantly, when will the Liberal government show some respect for Quebecers? Madam Speaker, I can assure my colleague that we have put in place changes in the system to EI for all Canadians, including Quebecers. I will look at the case of this person and provide a reply as soon as possible.
Member for Oshawa.
Madam Speaker, the holidays are less than a month away, and like many Canadians across the country, I'm concerned that I may not be able to visit my mom in her long-term care home because of a lacking rapid testing capacity at nursing homes. For months, while other developed nations offered rapid testing to their populations, this government dithered and refused to approve rapid tests until only recently. Madam Speaker, can this government promise Canadians that nursing homes will have enough rapid tests to reunite families in time for Christmas across this country?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And we know that holiday celebrations are going to be different this year. So we're asking that folks check with their local public health officials before they make any plans. But just on rapid tests, Madam Speaker, I have some current numbers here. Ontario has received over 2,076,000 rapid tests already and are starting to use them. Quebec, 1.3 million. BC, 627,000. In Nova Scotia, Madam Speaker, 70,992. And there are pop-up rapid testing sites popping up all over my community today and tomorrow. So, Madam Speaker, rapid tests are out there and they're being used.
For Whitby.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last week, our government tabled an important bill on our pathway to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. My constituents and Canadians want to see how our industries will produce the cleanest, greenest, and most cutting-edge products in the world. They want to know they will have access to new jobs and careers in a competitive economy that will last to 2030 and beyond. Can the Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Environment and Climate Change please update the House on how we can get to a cleaner future and a stronger economy at the same time?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the honourable member from Whitby for his commitment to delivering a better future. Madam Speaker, we know that around the world that countries, industry, and businesses are moving to a cleaner, innovative, low-carbon future. And last week, we saw the same here in Canada as industry, labour, environmentalists, boards of trade, and major energy companies all said that the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act is an important step towards achieving a net zero future by 2050. Madam Speaker, we agree with them that good environmental policy is good business.
The Honourable Member for South Okanagan West Kootenay.
Madam Speaker, the Canada Energy Regulator's latest report shows that if the government honours its climate commitments and its new Climate Accountability Bill, they will be pushing pipeline expansions in a world where Canada's energy sector doesn't even need them. The Liberals aren't on track to meeting our 2030 climate targets, and without a significant change of course, we won't reach net zero by 2050. They have a chance to show that they're serious about tackling climate change. So will the Liberals stop pushing TMX and Keystone XL for a world where they won't be needed?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act will hold the federal government to its commitment of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Madam Speaker, countries around the world are accelerating their transition to a net zero economy, and Canada simply can't fall behind. We must seize the economic opportunity that climate action presents. Net zero is not just a plan for a healthier environment, it's a plan to build a cleaner, more innovative, and more competitive economy.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener-South Hespeler.
Madam Speaker, previous Liberal governments have had a strong track record supporting Palestinians at the United Nations. Soon after Harper was elected, the country's support for Palestine took a sharp nosedive. Canada's anti-Palestinian voting pattern has put us out of step with the vast majority of countries. Can the Minister please explain when Canada will rejoin the international community and support the legitimate aspirations of Palestinian people?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to recognize the member for his hard work as chair of the Canada-Palestine Parliamentary Friendship Group. Let me state very clearly, Canada is a steadfast friend and ally of Israel. Canada is also a steadfast friend of the Palestinian people, and we're committed to a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East, including the creation of a Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security with Israel. That principle guides all our actions in this regard, a two-state solution. Our position remains that this can only be achieved through direct negotiations between the parties. We urge them to create those conditions to come back to the table.
This is all the time we have for oral questions. I believe we have a point of order from the Honourable Member for Labrador.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I apologize to the House and to the interpreters. My headset had broken. There's a new set en route to me. As you know, I live in the north, and these things take a little time. The House have said that the bud set I'm using with the microphone would help with translation. So I ask for consent of the House to do my SO31 statement, please.
The Honourable Member have unanimous consent. Est-ce qu'elle a le consentement unanime? Merci. The Honourable Member can proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Northerners have shown incredible strength and resilience in protecting their communities and loved ones from COVID-19. As cases continue to rise in Nunavut, we've heard the call from the government of Nunavut, Inuit partners, and community organizations for additional federal support for health services, connectivity, food security, PPE, cleaning supplies, and more to assist their affected communities. Our government responded by providing additional urgent assistance to the government of Nunavut and to Nunavut Tungavik Incorporation. The nearly $20 million in immediate federal funding will help support northern communities and Inuit partners to keep people safe and prevent the further spread of COVID-19. I want to commend and thank the leadership of the government of Nunavut, our Inuit partners, health professionals, and all frontline workers in keeping people safe, and we will not hesitate to provide additional support as needed. By working together, our government is ensuring that community...
The time, I apologize, but the time is up. I believe we have a point of order from the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is not the first time I've raised the same point of order. On at least 3 occasions during question period, we had members interrupt while answers were given. I believe it was twice the member for Battle River Crowfoot and once from Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon. I would remind all members of this House that for those of us participating virtually, when someone takes himself off mute to speak and interrupt a minister giving an answer, it literally makes it impossible for us to hear the answer. Though we may disagree with it, I think it's important that the person who has the floor is able to give the answer so all members can benefit from it. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much to the Parliamentary Secretary for this reminder to all members that when you are participating virtually, please make sure that your mics are on mute. Un petit rappel pour que tous les membres qui...
Just a brief reminder, those participating virtually, please keep your microphones on mute when your colleagues are speaking. So, now we will move on with the order of business.
Alors, dépôt de documents.
Tabling of documents.